Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video 188 on animal die-offs. This is an interesting topic. It has multiple overlaps with the occult, but more so the unexplained. By the way, if you have any ideas for occult topics, put them in the comments here on YouTube or whatever platform you're using. Now, I am looking for about a dozen other topics to cover. I've got some filled out, but things change over time. I move them around number-wise, and it can be confusing. I'm not the most organized person. As far as animal die-offs go, I think the most compelling connection to the occult in the folkloric sense is with witchcraft a la the Burning Times. That is, that at the time, religiously pious, superstitious people, they thought if you went out in the woods, there were like spirits everywhere. There's spirits and witches, and they imagine demons and dragons. Satan is walking around somewhere in the world. He's going to and fro like a roaring lion. In the most literal physical sense, you could actually see Satan himself. By the way, he seems to travel a lot because he appears in a lot of cultures, oddly enough, wherever Christianity or Islam happen to inhabit. Never seems to show his face in Buddhist areas like Thailand or something. Where's Satan? No, there's demons there, but there's no Satan. It's very mysterious why he wouldn't visit people. Early people thought that the Manitou was actually the incarnation of the devil, the sort of water spirits that had antlers and little fish tails and looked kind of like a moose with a fish tail. The Manitou of Native American lore. It's a totally different issue. By the way, what's it called? Lake Monster Traditions, the book that I read, covers that in depth by Morger and Gagnon. You should definitely read it. I'll put a link in the description for that, actually, an extra link. With regards to animal die-offs, what was rumored within the Burning Times, and before and to some extent after as well, was that witches, wizards, those titles. I'm literally gonna make a video on those different occult titles because people are so confused about them. What's a wizard? What's a warlock? What's the difference? I don't understand. Can a man be a witch? What about mages? What about sorcery, sorceress, and sorcerer? I don't understand these titles. What's high priest mean? And so I'll cover that too. I will try to take care of this confusion because really it's just people making their own choices in many cases. With animal die-offs, anytime your cow died, it was Satan or a witch or demons or some spirit. The salamanders came and poisoned it. It got killed by a basilisk, all these fantastic cryptids that they had back then. Now, which, by the way, I still want to believe in these things. I want to live in a world that's more fantastic than just the totally mundane. If people think that that's superstitious nonsense, that's fine. I'm a happier person for it. I don't ask for anyone else to believe in these things. I have some strange beliefs of my own. So what you would do is instead of own up to the fact that your cabbage patch was poorly drained, you would blame the rotting cabbages on a witch or something. Oh, old Miss Leary over there, whose cow fucking burned my barn down. She's obviously a witch. My cabbages died. I saw her the other day sweeping and muttering. Then my cabbages, I wake up, they're all covered in flies and shit. We must burn her. Although in the more civilized circles, when they were doing Swimming the Witch, when the person inevitably, because they couldn't swim, started drowning, they would pull them back out. They wouldn't let them die. That's actually one part of folkloric history that you don't hear about. In most cases, they didn't let them drown. Once they started sinking down, they would yank them back out. They had a lever with a rope. They'd lower them down. They're wearing fucking 5 layers of heavy clothes. Of course they're going to start drowning. And then basically it was like, oh, okay, someone else is the witch. Who else wants to go for a swim? Beyond that, though, in the modern sense, there are cases of large-scale animal die-offs, but there are also reports where we know what killed them. And in some cases, it's very funny. Like, there was a case, I think it was early this year. If I remember correctly, it was in the spring. It could have been last year. I think it was in Norway, and there was like a bunch of it was in Finland, I think I remember. There was a reindeer herd, and it got struck by lightning. There's like 100 dead reindeer out in this field. It's an animal die-off. If you didn't know that lightning had struck them, you'd be surprised, though. If you looked at the picture of this field of bodies, there was no evidence of a lightning strike. But they saw it happen, which is why they know how they died. With bird die-offs, I have a feeling that most of the time, it's the result of a bolt of lightning going through a flock of birds. All of a sudden, you get 100 dead crows lying everywhere. Contrary to popular belief, the fact that something has been hit by lightning does not always result in a massive gaping wound or them being charred into a pile of cinders. It can happen, but it's not always going to be the case. Also, pathogens. You have a flock of birds. They got into a patch of what they thought was edible material, they get poisoned, they take flight, at some point they all suddenly begin to expire fairly quickly, like fucking cult style. That is possible to happen as well. In other cases, though, we have more very strange reports. For instance, this intrigued me as a kid. I remember there was an Encyclopedia of the Unexplained or some book like that. I was reading through it. And there was the section about how sometimes you'd have like a hailstorm and there'd be like fish or small frogs or something in the hail. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't when you think about it. How the frog got into a hailstone is completely beyond me, because it shouldn't be able to levitate up into the sky to be up enough into the clouds to get rolled up into a ball of ice. It doesn't make any sense, so I'm not really actually sure how that happens. Sometimes it rains fish. Or other strange animals, or rains birds or something after a storm. In some cases, you might think of a tornado picking up animals. You know, if it goes through a flock of crows and spits them out everywhere. Or it goes through a pond, sucks up all the fish and spews them out everywhere. That's, fairly mundane. There was one case, I remember reading about this. I don't know whether this is true or whether it's some sort of urban legend, where a kid got sucked up by a tornado and shot out like 100 yards, landed safely in a tree. I'm willing to accept it could happen. So yeah, animal die-offs are mysterious. Some of them, as far as I know, are still completely unexplained, like having toads in hail, or having like worms falling from the sky for no reason. These things have actually happened. They've been documented. It's like that time that the river in India there turned blood red, and it's like they analyze it, they don't find any contaminants that should explain why it's red. It's not rust. It's not a dye factory upstream. It's not, surprisingly, it's not pollution related. What is it? Who knows? Biological? Who knows? It could be something with regards to the soil. It could be some weird chemical reaction. But bird die-offs, and die-offs of like herds of cows, reindeer, and stuff, typically, I would say 90% of the time we can explain it by saying lightning hit them, to tell the truth. But then there are those few cases where it's like, how'd the frog get into the hailstone? How'd the fish get into the fucking rain? I don't know. There's no way to explain it. As far as I know, they've never been able in a scientific setting to replicate any process by which a frog can end up in the upper atmosphere. But somehow it is happening, at least occasionally, and then it comes crashing down. There's like rotting frogs everywhere. Not necessarily the most pleasant. Look, I will tell you this. If there were a rain of fish here, though, I would be so happy, because you know what fish makes? Fish makes fish meal. I'd pile that shit all over the garden. It'd smell like death. But once it starts rotting, once it sort of dissolves into the soil, yeah, I can deal with that. The Native Americans used to, when they did the Three Sisters stuff, they'd have the corn, the squash, and the beans. They'd bury a few dead fish, actually, in with the corn, because it's fish meal. It's a fertilizer, basically. It'd fertilize their corn, make it bigger. They realized that it was a good idea. Not necessarily, rotting meat's not a good idea, but fish, yeah, it's perfectly fine. Put any rotting vegetative material in there, compost. They were composting. It's a really good idea. But animal die-offs are definitely one of the categories of things that I'm interested in, especially with regards, again, to the hailstone frogs and stuff. I still want to see, by the way, like a tatzelworm or something like that. That's about all. Peace out.